Long before any written chronicle carved human memory into clay or inked it onto parchment, the earth itself kept its own archive in stone, in the secret geometry of continental drift, and in the measured pulse of its ancient climates. Each layer recording a chapter of a story far older than civilization. To follow this story is to step into a world that began in silence, when the young planet spun under a sun far dimmer than the one we know today, a sun wrapped in its own adolescence, casting pale light over oceans that had only just cooled enough to stop boiling. It was an era when the Earth's crust trembled like the shifting skin of a creature not yet accustomed to its own existence, when volcanoes fed the sky with ceaseless torrents of steam, sulfur, and ash, and when the continents, if they could yet be called continents, were little more than restless fragments drifting over a mantle still hot with the memory of creation. In those primordial seas, long before the first creature took shape, a delicate balance began to emerge from the chaos. Lightning cracked through the thick atmosphere, splitting molecules and stirring the chemical cauldron that would one day give rise to life. The oceans became a vast laboratory of drifting elements, each wave carrying whispers of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and phosphorus, atoms that had traveled from the hearts of long-dead stars to this newborn sphere of water and stone. As the planet stabilized, these building blocks met in new combinations, forming fragile organic molecules that clung together in the shadows of hydrothermal vents, in shallow tidal pools, and in the quiet zones where sunlight met darkness. The first self-replicating structures, barely more than patterns of chemical persistence, appeared not as purposeful creations, but as consequences of physics, nudging matter toward complexity. From such structures emerged the earliest protocells, floating like microscopic embers in the ocean's vast expanse, their boundaries delicate, their existence improbable. Over millions of years, the protocells refined themselves through countless cycles of chance, until one lineage found stability in the genetic code that would guide all future life. In these ancient waters, photosynthesis evolved, first as a modest chemical trick performed by bacteria, then as a planetary force with the power to reshape the atmosphere. Cyanobacteria bloomed in colossal colonies, forming stromatolites that still survive in hidden corners of modern Earth, silent monuments to the first organisms that exhaled oxygen into a world that had none. The oxygenation of the atmosphere unfolded slowly, but its consequence was profound. As oxygen levels climbed, oceans changed color, minerals rusted on the seafloor, and life was compelled to reinvent itself in this new oxidizing world. The Great Oxygenation Event, as we now call it, was both a catastrophe and an opportunity. While many anaerobic species vanished into extinction, others adapted, harnessing the energy of oxygen for more complex metabolisms. With this shift, life on Earth took its first step toward the diversity that would one day populate every corner of the planet. Eukaryotes appeared next, their origin marked by one of the most extraordinary mergers in natural history. A single-celled organism engulfed a smaller bacterium, not as prey, but as a partner, allowing it to remain alive within its own cytoplasm. The smaller cell became the mitochondrion, a powerhouse within a living host, and from this symbiosis emerged a new kind of life, cells with nuclei, with internal compartments, with the capacity for greater intricacy. These eukaryotic ancestors gave rise to algae, fungi, plants, and animals, weaving the first threads of a biological tapestry that stretched across shallow seas and continental shelves. The Cambrian explosion followed, a sudden, unparalleled burst of evolutionary creativity. Creatures of bewildering design emerged, trilobites with faceted eyes, anomalocaridids with grasping appendages, and armored worms dragging themselves across the seabed. The oceans teemed with predators and prey, with shelled beings and soft-bodied wonders, all of them navigating ecosystems that were forming for the first time. Sensory organs sharpened, limbs diversified, and exoskeletons hardened as life embarked on an arms race whose legacy still shapes living organisms. It was during this period that the earliest chordates appeared, small and unassuming, yet bearing the structural blueprint that would eventually lead to fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. As plate tectonics slowly reconfigured the planet, continents assembled into supercontinents and broke apart again, each rearrangement altering global climate patterns, ocean currents, and the pathways of evolution. The first plants colonized land, anchoring themselves in mineral-rich soil and releasing oxygen in abundance. Their arrival transformed barren landscapes into lush green expanses and laid the foundation for vast forests that would one day swell into coal-rich deposits buried beneath our feet. Insects followed, buzzing across the primeval greenery, spreading spores and establishing niches that would sustain them for hundreds of millions of years. The conquest of land continued when fishes, equipped with fleshy fins and primitive lungs, dragged themselves onto muddy shores to explore the unfamiliar terrain. These early tetrapods were awkward pioneers, yet their tentative steps inaugurated a lineage that would give rise to amphibians, reptiles, and eventually the great reptilian dynasties that dominated the Mesozoic era. During this time, dinosaurs rose to prominence, some towering over forests, others racing across plains, and others, small and feathered, taking to the air with wings that hinted at the birds they would become. They inhabited every ecosystem and diversified into myriad forms, from the thunderous sauropods to the agile raptors whose keen eyes scanned their surroundings for movement. The seas were no less vibrant. Marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs swam through waters teeming with ammonites, their spiral shells glinting in the filtered sunlight. Coral reefs flourished, providing refuge for countless species, while pterosaurs ruled the skies above, their wingspans casting fleeting shadows over coastlines and estuaries. Through it all, volcanic activity reshaped the land. Meteor impacts scarred the surface, and shifting climates tested every organism's resilience. Eukaryotes appeared next, their origin marked by one of the most extraordinary mergers in natural history. A single-celled organism engulfed a smaller bacterium, not as prey, but as a partner, allowing it to remain alive within its own cytoplasm. The smaller cell became the mitochondrion, a powerhouse within a living host, and from this symbiosis emerged a new kind of life, cells with nuclei, with internal compartments, with the capacity for greater intricacy. These eukaryotic ancestors gave rise to algae, fungi, plants, and animals, weaving the first threads of a biological tapestry that stretched across shallow seas and continental shelves. The Cambrian explosion followed, a sudden, unparalleled burst of evolutionary creativity. Creatures of bewildering design emerged, trilobites with faceted eyes, anomalocaridids with grasping appendages, and armored worms dragging themselves across the seabed. The oceans teemed with predators and prey, with shelled beings and soft-bodied wonders, all of them navigating ecosystems that were forming for the first time. Sensory organs sharpened, limbs diversified, and exoskeletons hardened as life embarked on an arms race whose legacy still shapes living organisms. It was during this period that the earliest chordates appeared, small and unassuming, yet bearing the structural blueprint that would eventually lead to fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. As plate tectonics slowly reconfigured the planet, continents assembled into supercontinents and broke apart again, each rearrangement altering global climate patterns, ocean currents, and the pathways of evolution. The first plants colonized land, anchoring themselves in mineral-rich soil and releasing oxygen in abundance. Their arrival transformed barren landscapes into lush green expanses and laid the foundation for vast forests that would one day swell into coal-rich deposits buried beneath our feet. Insects followed, buzzing across the primeval greenery, spreading spores and establishing niches that would sustain them for hundreds of millions of years. The conquest of land continued when fishes, equipped with fleshy fins and primitive lungs, dragged themselves onto muddy shores to explore the unfamiliar terrain. These early tetrapods were awkward pioneers, yet their tentative steps inaugurated a lineage that would give rise to amphibians, reptiles, and eventually
the great reptilian dynasties that dominated the Mesozoic era. During this time, dinosaurs rose to prominence, some towering over forests, others racing across plains, and others, small and feathered, taking to the air with wings that hinted at the birds they would become. They inhabited every ecosystem and diversified into myriad forms, from the thunderous sauropods to the agile raptors whose keen eyes scanned their surroundings for movement. The seas were no less vibrant. Marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs swam through waters teeming with ammonites, their spiral shells glinting in the filtered sunlight. Coral reefs flourished, providing refuge for progless species, while petrosaurs ruled the skies above, their wingspans casting fleeting shadows over coastlines and estuaries. Through it all, volcanic activity reshaped the land, meteor impacts scarred the surface, and shifting climates tested every organism's resilience.
As the human mind expanded, as language took root, and as memories began to pass from generation to generation, the Earth's own memory endured in forests that towered over every continent. Primeval woodlands in Europe sheltered aurochs beneath their dense canopies, while the rainforests of Southeast Asia thrummed with the movements of ancestors to orangutans, whose quiet intelligence mirrored distant echoes of human cognition. In the Amazon, long before any human hand felled a tree, millions of species interacted in a symphony of competition and cooperation, from orchids that deceived pollinators with phantom promises, to leafcutter ants cultivating vast underground fungal gardens as meticulously as any farmer tending crops. Each organism, no matter how small, contributed a thread to the immense tapestry of life, woven so intricately that removing even one species could alter the entire pattern. Meanwhile, the oceans continued their own ancient rituals. Currents like the Gulf Stream carried warm waters thousands of miles, moderating climates and sustaining migrations that had been ongoing for millions of years. Whales sang across vast distances, their haunting calls echoing through abysses that sunlight never touched. Some of these giants descended from land-dwelling ancestors who returned to the sea after finding its vastness more forgiving than the crowded shores of the early Eocene. Their bodies transformed over millions of years. Legs receded, tails broadened, and nostrils migrated upward to become blowholes that could open and close like living valves. Their evolution mirrored Earth's tendency to recycle forms, to take what already exists and mold it into something that fits a new niche, a new opportunity. As the Holocene blossomed, humans crossed continents, encountered unfamiliar landscapes, and forged cultures shaped by the environments that sustained them.
In the fertile floodplains of the Nile, people learned to predict the river's annual rise, recognizing that the silt it carried from distant highlands was a gift from mountains they had never seen. They built communities along its banks, harvesting grains that had been domesticated from wild grasses whose genetic ancestors still grow in hidden pockets of the Levant. Far to the east, in China's river valleys, the domestication of rice transformed wetlands into engineered marvels, with terraced paddies reflecting the skies like mirrors stacked across entire mountainsides. Each agricultural revolution altered not only human societies, but also the ecosystems around them, redirecting waterways, reshaping soils, and guiding the evolutionary paths of countless plant and animal species. Yet even these burgeoning civilizations remain small footsteps in the colossal story of life on Earth, a story still written by tectonic forces that folded landscapes and by climatic cycles that shifted with the precision of a cosmic clock. Ice ages advanced and retreated, grinding rock into fertile soil that would later nourish forests and fields. Mammoths roamed the tundra, their curved tusks sweeping arcs through the cold air as they migrated across frozen plains. Saber-toothed cats stalked the shadows of Pleistocene valleys, while giant ground sloths lumbered through the Americas, peeling leaves from branches with claws longer than a human hand. These creatures thrived in ecosystems sculpted by glaciation, where enormous ice sheets carved basins that would become the Great Lakes and left behind moraines that shaped the contours of entire regions. As climates warmed and megafauna gradually vanished, whether through human activity, environmental shifts, or a combination of both, new ecological equilibria emerged. Forests expanded into territories once buried under ice, while grasslands stretched across continents, becoming arenas for evolutionary innovations in speed, endurance, and social complexity. Herds of wildebeest, bison, and antelope evolved new strategies for migration, navigating landscapes where their predators honed tactics of cooperation and stealth. Wolves developed pack dynamics that allowed them to pursue prey far larger than themselves, a behavioral refinement that would one day create the conditions for their ancient partnership with humans. Even the Earth's interior played a quiet role in shaping life's destiny. The magnetic field, born from the movement of molten iron in the planet's core, shielded the atmosphere from solar winds that could strip away protective gases. Without this invisible armor, life on land might never have flourished. The poles, dancing with auroras, marked zones where the magnetic field guided charged particles into the sky, creating lights that early humans admired without understanding their cosmic origins. This same magnetic field flipped many times throughout Earth's history, reversing north and south in an unpredictable pattern recorded in the alignment of minerals within ancient lava flows. The atmosphere, too, evolved in tandem with life. Plants oxygenated the air, while volcanic eruptions spewed ash that cooled the climate for years at a time. Meteor impacts occasionally disrupted this balance, scattering dust that dimmed the sun and caused species to waver on the brink of extinction. Through every shift, life adapted, radiated, or disappeared, each outcome shaping the opportunities available to future generations of organisms. When early humans observed the night sky, tracking the cycles of stars and seasons, they were unknowingly participating in a tradition as old as the first organisms that responded to day and night. Circadian rhythms, embedded deeply in biology, scaled upward into human rituals, agricultural calendars, and navigational strategies. The stars themselves were remnants of ancient supernovae that had seeded the solar system with the elements essential for life: iron in blood, calcium in bones, carbon in every cell. To study Earth's history is to recognize that life is not separate from the cosmos. It is an extension of it, shaped by forces far beyond the planet's surface. Across millennia, species continued their endless dance of survival. Coral reefs constructed massive underwater cities, layer upon layer, providing habitats for fish whose patterns and colors dazzled even the most experienced naturalists. Some fish communicated through bioluminescence, flickering patterns of light in the deep where sunlight cannot reach. In the Arctic, polar bears stalked seals across sea ice that shifted with the seasons, relying on instincts honed through generations of adaptation to extreme environments. In deserts, cacti evolved spines to conserve water, while meerkats developed elaborate systems of alarm calls to warn their colonies of approaching predators.
Life diversified into forms that pushed the boundaries of possibility. Tardigrades survived extreme radiation and the vacuum of space, as if demonstrating nature's most stubborn defiance. Fungi spread through soil in networks so expansive they rivaled the largest living organisms on Earth, transmitting signals through filaments that behaved like the neural pathways of a decentralized mind. Octopuses, with their remarkable intelligence and flexible bodies, solved problems with an ingenuity that suggested an alien origin, though they were entirely products of Earth's own evolutionary pathways. Across the African savannas, where early humans once stood upright, the winds that shaped their fate continued to sculpt landscapes, carrying seeds across vast distances and eroding stones into grains of sand that accumulated in dunes, shifting like living sculptures. These dunes, climbing and collapsing in restless cycles, recorded patterns of ancient climates as surely as fossils captured the stories of extinct creatures. In the Sahara, long before it became a desert of shimmering horizons, monsoon rains filled meadowlands where hippos lounged in muddy pools and crocodiles hunted in wide rivers that have long since dried up. Cave paintings left by people who navigated this greener Sahara show giraffes stretching upward toward acacia leaves, cattle grazing in open grasslands, and hunters following herds through a world unrecognizable to modern eyes, yet mapped forever in pigments derived from ochre, charcoal, and minerals mixed with the moisture of human breath. Far from these arid regions, glaciers continued their slow retreat through northern latitudes, carving fjords whose sheer cliffs plunged into deep waters. As ice sheets melted, they released colossal volumes of fresh water that disrupted ocean currents, causing abrupt climatic shifts that tested both ecosystems and early societies. Forests expanded across lands newly freed from ice, inviting animals like moose, reindeer, and wolves to establish territories that mirrored the changing vegetation zones. In these silent realms of snowmelt and budding leaves, lichens colonized the bare rock first, making way for mosses, grasses, and finally towering conifers whose needles captured sunlight even when winters grew long and unforgiving. Meanwhile, in the world's tropical regions, monsoon cycles nourished rainforests that pulsed with life in every layer, from the damp soil where beetles buried themselves under decomposing leaves to the canopy where howler monkeys announced their presence with resonant calls that rolled like thunder across the treetops. Evolutionary arms races unfolded here in ways both dramatic and subtle. Vines develop toxins to protect their leaves from herbivores, prompting insects to evolve biochemical defenses in response. Orchids crafted intricate shapes to attract specific pollinators, some relying on bees, others on moths, and still others on deceptive lures that mimicked the appearance or scent of female insects. This endless exchange between plant and pollinator forged relationships so specialized that the disappearance of one could seal the fate of the other. In the deeper recesses of Earth's wilderness, volcanic islands rose from the ocean floor as molten rock pierced the crust and spilled forth into the sea. These islands became isolated laboratories of evolution, places where species diverged from their mainland ancestors into entirely new forms. The Galapagos, the Canaries, the Hawaiian archipelago, all bore witness to the creativity of natural selection. On each island, finches adapted their beaks to available food sources. Iguanas learned to swim in search of seaweed, and flightless birds survived without fear of predators. Time on these islands moved at its own pace, unaffected by wars, migrations, and civilizations, unfolding worlds away on the continents. In Mesopotamia, the Euphrates and Tigris nurtured early urban centers whose scribes recorded harvests and celestial observations on clay tablets that would endure for millennia. In the Indus Valley, meticulously planned cities rose along trade routes frequented by merchants who carried precious stones, spices, and stories across great distances. Meanwhile, the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers shaped China's early dynasties, their deltas teeming with life
that thrived in wetlands and rice fields, carved into the landscape with a precision that mirrored the meticulousness of evolving societies. But even as civilizations expanded, the planet's ancient rhythms remained unchanged. Seasonal migrations continued in every hemisphere. Flocks of cranes traced ancient routes across Eurasia. Monarch butterflies fluttered over continents in search of warmer climates, and salmon returned to the rivers of their birth, navigating currents and obstacles with unwavering determination. These migrations stitched together the planet's ecosystems, redistributing nutrients, pollinating plants, and preserving ancestral pathways carved into instinct by thousands of generations. In the oceans, entire ecosystems formed around fissures in the sea floor, where superheated water, rich in minerals, surged upward. These hydrothermal vents, hidden beneath crushing pressures and eternal darkness, became havens for life unlike anything on the surface. Tube worms without mouths or digestive systems thrived in symbiosis with bacteria that transformed chemical energy into sustenance. Giant clams grew in clusters around vent openings, their shells reflecting the faint glimmer of bioluminescent creatures drifting nearby. These communities proved that life did not rely solely on sunlight. It could emerge wherever energy of any kind flowed in abundance. Far above these depths, currents transported microscopic plankton whose abundance formed the foundation of marine food webs. Some of this plankton produced oxygen, contributing significantly to the air humans breathed. Others served as food for krill, which in turn sustained whales, whose migrations covered thousands of miles. The cyclical rise and fall of plankton populations influenced everything from the health of coral reefs to the productivity of fisheries that human societies depended on centuries later.
In deserts, life endured with strategies born from extremes. Camels stored fat, not water, in their humps, a resource they could convert to energy during long journeys across barren expanses. Desert foxes evolved large ears that dissipated heat, while sidewinder snakes moved across scorching sand with precise, angled motions that minimized contact with the ground. Even plants found ways to survive in the harshest climates. Some seeds remained dormant for years, awakening only when rare rains softened the earth, creating brief windows of growth and reproduction before the desiccating sun reclaimed the land. In the shadowed depths of jungles, evolution produced creatures whose adaptations pushed the boundaries of plausibility. Poison dart frogs carried alkaloid toxins derived from their diet of ants and mites, their vivid colors warning predators of lethal consequences. Harpy eagles soared above the canopy with talons capable of grasping monkeys from branches.
while leafcutter ants transported fragments of leaves to underground chambers where fungal crops grew in carefully maintained conditions. Each species, no matter how small, participated in a delicate choreography that had unfolded long before humans learned to record their observations. And above it all, the planet turned in quiet grandeur, its rotation giving rise to the alternation of light and darkness that shaped everything from the migration of birds to the blooming of nocturnal flowers. The tilt of Earth's axis dictated seasons, the moon's gravity guided tides, and the sun's cycles influenced climates in ways that early astronomers documented with tools as simple as stone markers aligned with solstices and equinoxes. These observations, though primitive in method, reflected a deep intuition that life was inseparable from the larger cosmic forces that governed the heavens. Yet the story of Earth's life did not unfold in isolation. Comets delivered organic molecules that may have influenced early chemical pathways. Solar radiation spurred mutations that drove evolution forward. The gravitational pull of distant planets subtly altered Earth's orbit over tens of thousands of years, changing the patterns of ice ages and interglacial periods. The Earth's history was never a closed system, but a part of an intricate cosmic interplay in which every force, from volcanic eruptions to meteor strikes, played a role in shaping the diversity of species and the ecosystems they inhabited. Still, life persisted, fragile yet resilient, vulnerable yet ingenious, adapting to droughts, floods, extinctions, and opportunities with equal vigor. Every organism, from the simplest microbe to the most complex mammal, carried within it the legacy of billions of years, encoded not in written histories, but in DNA sequences, passed along like a narrative woven into the very structure of existence.
Across the rugged coastlines, where waves carved monuments of stone long before any ship cut through those waters, ecosystems formed in the narrow spaces between land and sea, each tide bringing nutrients, shelter, and opportunity. Tide pools acted as arenas of constant change, where starfish crept slowly across the rocks, their tube feet gripping surfaces polished by centuries of surf, while anemones opened and closed with the rising waters, ensnaring tiny crustaceans that drifted too close to their venomous tentacles. Barnacles clung with tenacity to the rocks, their shells sealing shut during low tide to preserve the moisture within, only to open again when the ocean returned, filtering plankton from the currents that had shaped coastlines since the dawn of continents. Seabirds wheeled overhead in vast swirling formations, their migrations connecting distant corners of the globe. Albatrosses traced loops across entire oceans, returning to the same nesting sites year after year, guided by instincts refined across evolutionary epochs. Some birds navigated using Earth's magnetic field, sensing its subtle lines as though reading an invisible map etched into their very bones. Others followed the scent of phytoplankton blooms carried by winds, riding thermal currents that lifted them thousands of meters into the sky before they dove back toward distant archipelagos where their ancestors had nested for countless generations. In the world beneath the forest canopy, sunlight filtered through leaves like fractured emerald glass, illuminating landscapes where evolution unfolded with meticulous elegance. The tallest trees competed for light, stretching skyward and forming layers of foliage where life organized itself by altitude. In the understory, where shadows reigned, plants developed broad leaves to capture every stray photon that escaped through gaps in the canopy. Ferns unfurled in slow spirals, moss coated fallen logs in a soft verdant blanket, and fungi sprouted in delicate clusters, breaking down decaying wood and returning its nutrients to the soil. Ants patrolled the forest floor in lines so disciplined they resembled living rivers, while snakes slithered silently through the leaf litter, their movements barely perceptible in the dim light. In these rich environments, predators honed their strategies with the precision of artisans. Leopards mastered the art of stillness, blending into the shadows with coats patterned like dappled sunlight. Jaguars patrolled riverbanks in silence, powerful jaws capable of crushing the shells of turtles or the skulls of capybaras. Smaller predators like ocelots and servals relied on agility, weaving through brush with an elegance that made every movement a calculated whisper. Meanwhile, herbivores evolved equally impressive adaptations. Gazelles with limbs built for explosive bursts of speed, tapirs with flexible snouts capable of navigating dense undergrowth, and elephants with memories spanning decades, allowing matriarchs to guide their herds to waterholes, remembered from years when drought pressed the land into desolation.
Even the smallest organisms played roles of immense significance. Microbes in the soil fixed nitrogen, converting atmospheric gases into forms plants could use, while microscopic fungi linked tree roots in vast subterranean networks that distributed nutrients like the circulatory system of a hidden biological metropolis. These mycorrhizal highways allowed trees to communicate distress, share resources, and redistribute minerals to saplings struggling for survival, a collaboration invisible to the human eye, yet essential to the vitality of forests that had flourished since the Carboniferous period. In the highlands, where air thinned and temperatures fluctuated with a stubborn unpredictability, life persisted against odds that would have crushed less resilient species. Pikas collected grasses to store for winter, constructing hay piles that became lifelines when snow covered the ground. Condors soared along cliffsides sculpted by glacial erosion, using rising pockets of warm air to glide effortlessly above valleys where humans built terraces to grow crops in thin soil. Llamas and alpacas, descendants of ancient camelids that once roamed North America, adapted to these elevations with blood rich in hemoglobin, capturing oxygen efficiently in lands where the sky loomed closer and storms formed with startling swiftness. Rivers acted as the arteries of continents, carrying life-sustaining water from mountains to plains. Their winding paths shaped civilizations and ecosystems alike, depositing fertile silt that nourished floodplains and created deltas where biodiversity thrived. In South America, the Amazon River, descending from the Andes with unstoppable momentum, became the engine of the largest rainforest on Earth, supporting millions of species whose interactions created intricate webs of dependence. Electric fish navigated murky waters using pulses of electricity, while river dolphins communicated through complex whistles beneath the surface. Trees altered the chemistry of water with fallen leaves, and rains recycled moisture through continuous evaporation, creating a climate system where the forest fed itself through its own breath. Across the steppes and grasslands, life unfolded in sweeping panoramas. Herds of antelope, bison, and wildebeest grazed on herbaceous plants that evolved to withstand continuous grazing through deep root systems capable of regenerating quickly. These grasslands, often underestimated in their complexity, acted as carbon sinks, locking away nutrients in soil that had accumulated through centuries of decomposition. Predators like cheetahs, wolves, and hyenas shaped the behavior of ungulates, maintaining balance in ecosystems where the interplay between speed, endurance, and strategic cooperation determined survival. Each migration, each hunt, each birth under the open sky contributed to a rhythm that had persisted since the first grasses emerged during the Miocene period. In the swamps and wetlands, life took on forms uniquely suited to waterlogged environments. Mangroves grew in tidal zones where roots twisted above and below water, capturing sediment and stabilizing coastlines while providing nurseries for fish and crustaceans. Alligators carved gator holes in the southeastern United States, deepening pools that sustained countless species during dry spells. In the reeds of the Okavango Delta, lions adapted to hunting in shallow waters, wading through channels with muscles rippling beneath wet fur as they pursued lechways leaping through the marsh. These fluid landscapes shifted seasonally, creating habitats that expanded and contracted in response to rainfall far upstream, linking ecosystems through chains of cause and effect that extended far beyond their visible borders. In the frozen realms of the Arctic and Antarctic, life persisted in defiance of temperatures capable of halting unprotected cells. Penguins gathered in vast colonies, huddling together in rotating formations to share warmth during the darkest winter months. Seals raised pups on ice floes that drifted through waters patrolled by orcas, whose sophisticated communication and hunting techniques testified to an intelligence shaped by millions of years of evolution. Polar bears traversed the frozen expanse with paws wide enough to distribute their weight across thin ice, following the movements of seals that surfaced at breathing holes, maintained against the inexorable advance of winter. Beneath the ice, algae bloomed in hidden gardens where nutrient-rich water upwelled from deep currents, sustaining krill populations that fed everything from seabirds to baleen whales. Through all these environments, the planet's climate shifted in cycles governed by orbital variations, solar output, volcanic activity, and oceanic oscillations. Droughts alternated with centuries of abundant rainfall. Glaciers advanced and retreated, and species responded with migrations, adaptations, or extinctions. The resilience of life lay not in permanence, but in flexibility, an ability to reinvent itself through mutation, selection, and ecological innovation. It was a story not of linear progression, but of branching possibilities, each outcome shaped by the interplay of chance and necessity. Yet the continuity of life endured, stretching like an unbroken thread from the first self-replicating molecules to the astonishing diversity seen in every corner of the modern world. Every creature, from the colossal blue whale gliding through the deep to the humble ant carrying a morsel back to its colony, belonged to a lineage that had survived countless storms, cosmic impacts, and climatic upheavals. Together, these lineages formed a single, immense narrative, one that continued to unfold with every birth, every death, and every subtle shift in the balance of ecosystems shaped over eons.
Deep within the earth, far from sunlight and the familiar rhythms of seasons, life persisted in realms once thought barren and silent. In caverns carved by groundwater over millions of years, ecosystems emerged in total darkness, sustained not by photosynthesis, but by chemical reactions driven by minerals leached from ancient rock. Blind salamanders glided through subterranean pools, their pale skin translucent under flickers of bioluminescent microbes, drifting like stars in an underground sky. In the deepest recesses, where even echoes seemed reluctant to travel, colonies of bacteria clung to cavern walls, drawing energy from iron, sulfur, or methane, forming the base of food webs that had evolved in isolation for epochs. These hidden worlds demonstrated that life required not sunlight, but opportunity, a crack in stone, a pool of moisture, a source of energy buried in geological memory. Far above these caverns, the planet's surface bore the scars of celestial impacts that had reshaped continents and altered climates. Craters like Sudbury and Chicxulub whispered stories of firestorms and tsunamis, of darkened skies and mass extinctions that pruned the tree of life, allowing new branches to flourish. In the aftermath of such devastation, Earth reinvented itself with astonishing creativity. After the Permian extinction, when oceans stagnated and nearly all marine life perished, reefs rebuilt themselves from the smallest survivors, and new groups of animals filled empty ecological roles with forms never before seen. Each extinction, catastrophic in the moment, became a crucible from which life emerged transformed, its diversity richer and its strategies more varied. In temperate forests, the seasons sculpted behaviors as surely as evolution shaped anatomy. Trees sensed the shortening of days and withdrew nutrients from their leaves before releasing them in cascades of color. Bears gorged on berries and fish to build reserves for hibernation, while squirrels cached acorns in hidden stores that they would forget more often than remember, inadvertently planting trees across the woodland floor. Migrating birds timed their departures with remarkable precision, navigating by constellations, magnetic fields, and landmarks familiar to generations that had crossed the same routes since the Ice Age. With each spring, wildflowers burst from the soil in synchronized displays, their blooming coordinated with the emergence of pollinators whose life cycles were tuned to the faintest shifts in temperature. Across the open oceans, the largest migrations on Earth unfolded in silence beneath the surface. Whale sharks followed plankton blooms across tropical waters, their spotted bodies gliding with slow, measured grace. Leatherback turtles navigated entire hemispheres, guided by an innate sense of direction that scientists still struggle to understand. Tuna, built for speed, crossed the Pacific in schools so vast they seemed to move as a single organism, each fish responding to the movements of its neighbors with the precision of a murmuration of starlings. These migrations linked ecosystems separated by thousands of miles, ensuring a continuous flow of nutrients, genes, and energy through the planet's marine networks.
In coral reefs, cities of living stone thrived with frenetic energy. Corals, small and seemingly fragile, built massive structures over centuries, providing shelter for thousands of species. Parrotfish grazed on algae that threatened to smother corals, their beaks grinding rock into the fine sand that formed pristine tropical beaches. Cleaner wrasses operated stations where larger fish arrived to have parasites removed with meticulous care, a delicate negotiation that demonstrated cooperation as a strategy as ancient as predation. Octopuses navigated these reefs with uncanny intelligence, rearranging shells to construct temporary fortresses and solving problems that hinted at a deep alien consciousness molded by evolutionary pressures in underwater labyrinths. In the great boreal forests stretching across the northern latitudes, life endured through winters that tested endurance as ruthlessly as any predator. Lynxes padded silently through snowdrifts in pursuit of snowshoe hares, whose coats shifted from brown to white with the seasons. Moose browsed on willows beneath auroras shimmering across the sky, their massive forms silhouetted against curtains of green light shaped by solar winds interacting with the atmosphere. Wolves traveled in coordinated packs across frozen lakes, communicating through howls that carried over miles of silent forest. Their strategies and social roles honed through countless generations of cooperative hunting. On volcanic slopes, ecosystems thrived in the aftermath of destruction. When Mount St. Helens erupted, leveling forests and leaving behind a landscape of ash and barren rock, life returned with astonishing speed. Lupins were among the first pioneers, fixing nitrogen in the soil and creating conditions for other plants to follow. Insects arrived on the wind. Birds established territories among the fallen trees, and mammals ventured into the new terrain, exploring spaces where vegetation had only just begun to reclaim the land. Each eruption, each lava flow, each plume of ash marked not an end but a beginning, a reset that allowed ecological succession to unfold in a predictable yet endlessly fascinating pattern. High above mountain ranges, atmospheres thinned into cold, windswept realms inhabited by species adapted to extremes of temperature, oxygen scarcity, and rugged terrain. Snow leopards roamed the Himalayas, their thick fur and enlarged nasal passages suited for thin air and frigid nights. Mountain goats climbed cliffs with agility that defied gravity, their hooves gripping tiny ledges that seemed too narrow for even a bird to perch upon. Alpine flowers bloomed in brief summers, displaying brilliant colors in soils enriched by centuries of glacial grinding. Each organism carried within its body the adaptations needed to survive where storms could appear without warning, and where a misstep could mean an abrupt end.
In the savannas, the drama of life unfolded in sequences of tension and release. Lions cooperated in prides that relied on stealth and teamwork, their hunts timed to exploit the vulnerability of prey at dawn or dusk. Elephants traveled along ancient routes to watering holes, known only to matriarchs whose memories spanned decades, their migrations triggering cascades of ecological change wherever they passed. Termites built towering mounds with internal ventilation systems so sophisticated they maintained constant temperatures despite scorching days and frigid nights. These structures became microhabitats for numerous other species, demonstrating that engineering, too, could emerge from instinctual behavior refined through evolutionary time. In the polar seas, where waters brimmed with nutrients brought up from the depths,
food chains thrived in brief but explosive bursts of abundance. During the Arctic summer, the sun remained above the horizon for weeks, allowing phytoplankton to bloom in massive quantities that fed krill, fish, seabirds, and whales. Bowhead whales, some living over 2 centuries, navigated through channels of pack ice with intimate knowledge of currents and feeding grounds passed down through generations. Narwhals traveled in pods beneath the ice, their spiraled tusks sensing temperature changes and salinity shifts that guided them through a labyrinthine underwater world. In freshwater rivers and lakes, life adapted to dynamic conditions shaped by rainfall, snowmelt, and sediment flow. Sturgeons, survivors from the age of dinosaurs, swam upriver to spawn, their armored bodies reflecting the continuity of ancient lineages. Otters played and hunted in waterways that connected entire ecosystems through the movement of fish and insects. Beavers transformed landscapes with dams that slowed water flow, creating wetlands that attracted birds, amphibians, and plants. The ripple effects of their engineering extended far beyond their lodges, influencing entire watersheds in ways that echoed through forests and floodplains. And as these stories unfolded across biomes and continents, new species continued to evolve in response to shifting environments. Islands gave rise to dwarf elephants, giant tortoises, and birds capable of remarkable diversifications. Mountains isolated populations that diverged into distinct species, while valleys sheltered genetic lineages that persisted through eras of climate shift. Across the world, adaptive radiation continued in forms as subtle as a change in flower shape or as dramatic as the emergence of a predator whose appearance altered the balance of an entire ecosystem. Still, the Earth's deeper cycles continued. Currents shifted, climates oscillated, continents drifted, carrying life forward in a procession as old as the planet itself. These processes, measured in millennia, shaped not only ecosystems, but the rise and fall of species, the expansion of forests, and the retreat of deserts. And through it all, life persisted, adapting and enduring in an ever-changing world whose history stretched far beyond the memory of any individual creature, yet resonated within the structure of every living cell.
Life beneath the soil unfolded with a complexity rivaling anything seen above ground. An unseen civilization woven through roots, stones, and microscopic chambers. Earthworms tunneled through the darkness, aerating the soil with movements so steady and ancient that forests depended on their silent labor long before the first human footprint ever touched the ground. Springtails leaped between grains of sand, their bodies glistening with moisture drawn from the thin film that clung to mineral surfaces. Beetle larvae carved winding passages through decaying wood, transforming trunks into habitats rich with nutrients that trees of the next generation
would someday draw into their trunks and branches. Above this hidden world, prairies stretched toward horizons where the land rose and fell like waves held in place. Bison churned the soil with hooves hardened by thousands of migrations, scattering seeds that grass species had evolved to survive on the wind. Prairie dogs shaped entire microcosms through their burrows, creating networks of tunnels that moderated temperatures, funneled airflow, and provided shelter for owls, snakes, and countless insects that depended on these subterranean sanctuaries. Every colony altered the landscape in ways that rippled outward for miles. Each mound a testament to a communal intelligence refined across ages of trial, error, and instinct. In the high deserts, where rainfall came rarely and unpredictably, life timed its rhythms with precision worthy of celestial mechanics. Creosote bushes released chemicals that prevented other plants from growing too close, carving territories in which they alone could thrive. Kangaroo rats survived without ever drinking water directly, drawing moisture from seeds and storing them in caches that would sustain them through nights when temperatures plunged beneath the weight of the stars. Even cacti, seemingly rigid and inert, pulsed with life at night when their stomata opened to inhale carbon dioxide while the desert cooled, conserving precious water that would have evaporated in the heat of day. At the boundaries between ecosystems, where forests gave way to grasslands or wetlands merged into savannas, life adapted with fluidity, exploiting the advantages of both worlds. Coyotes hunted along these edges, adjusting their strategies depending on whether they stalked prey among trees or open fields. Deer drifted between zones, seeking shelter in shadowed groves and nourishment in sunlit meadows. Birds nested in reeds that swayed between marsh and dry land, their eggs safe from predators unable to navigate the watery labyrinths around their nests. These transitional regions, though narrow, thrived with biodiversity born from the mingling of worlds once thought separate. In the oceans, storms churned the surface, drawing nutrients from the depths in spiraling columns that fed plankton blooms, spreading like vast green tapestries across the water. Jellyfish drifted among them, their translucent bells pulsing with movements as ancient as the first seas. Some descended into the twilight zone, where light faded into blue obscurity, their bodies glowing with bioluminescence that startled predators and signaled mates in languages of light older than spoken words. Below them, lanternfish rose each night from deep waters to feed, participating in the largest daily migration on the planet, a constant, rhythmic ascent and descent that shaped marine food webs on a scale imperceptible from the shore.
In lands shaped by monsoons, life followed patterns dictated by rains that arrived with thunderous certainty. Flooded fields became mirrors reflecting the sky,
where frogs called in choruses that echoed through the warm air. Dragonflies darted above these waters with wings that caught sunlight in shimmering refractions, hunting mosquitoes whose numbers rose with each pooling of rain. As the waters receded, seeds germinated in the fresh silt. Flowering plants erupted in sudden bursts of color, and migratory birds landed to feast upon the abundance born from cycles as predictable as the turning of the earth itself. Within the depths of jungles that remained untouched by human presence, trees older than recorded history towered over landscapes humming with cicadas, rustling reptiles, and primates leaping through the canopy with an ease that defied gravity. Tapirs moved with surprising silence through the undergrowth, stopping to browse on fruits that had evolved smells irresistible to their ancient lineage. Harpy eagles perched high above, their keen eyes scavenging the shadows for movement, their wings spanning distances wide enough to silence entire clearings when they passed overhead. Even in these crowded ecosystems, balance prevailed, held together by relationships so intricate that removing a single species could unravel the fabric of life woven through vines, branches, and hidden streams. In mountain valleys where cultures rose and fell with the shiftings of empires, the land itself bore witness to epochs of growth, decline, and renewal. Glacier meltwaters carved channels through the stone, feeding rivers that nurtured orchards, farms, and settlements built on slopes where terraces caught sunlight with geometric elegance. Ibex scaled cliffs above these villages, their hooves gripping surfaces polished smooth by centuries of wind. Vultures circled high overhead, tracing spirals in the thin air as they watched for the earliest signs of change in the landscape below, their flight patterns echoing the circular paths carved by the stars across the night sky. In coastal deltas, mangrove forests guarded shorelines with roots that rose like arching fingers from brackish water. Crabs scuttled along the mudflats, building burrows that aerated sediment and released nutrients into the tide. Fish navigated the labyrinth of roots to escape predators, while birds swooped down to pluck them from the surface in moments of decisive precision. These deltas shifted with each season, expanding during floods and withdrawing during droughts, forever in flux, yet never ceasing to support the abundance of life that depended on their unpredictable tides. And still, everywhere across the planet, life continued its relentless development, each organism participating in a story older than continents, older than oceans, even older than the mountains whose peaks pierced the sky. Evolution pressed forward with quiet persistence, shaping wings that rode on wind, fins that sliced through water, and lungs that drew breath
from an atmosphere forged by countless generations of photosynthetic ancestors. Across jungles, tundras, reefs, and plains, every heartbeat carried echoes of distant ages when the world was young and the foundations of life were only beginning to take form. Even now, as the planet turns beneath the vault of the heavens, the chronicle of life unfolds in every corner of the earth, in migrations traced across thousands of miles, in seeds carried on the wind, in the silent transformations of ecosystems responding to forces older than memory, and in the ongoing interplay of creation and destruction, adaptation and survival. The planet holds within itself the vast and intricate tale of everything that ever lived, everything that lives now, and everything that will one day emerge from the boundless potential of a world that has never ceased to evolve.